Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel, Beth Chats Books. Now today's video is going to be a wrap up part 1 of my library thriller mystery haul that I did recently. I'm over halfway through the pile of books that I put as my TBR in terms of the library thriller mystery haul. And I thought now would be a really good time to start wrapping some of them up because I'm planning to go to the library tomorrow and return the ones I've read. So I'm just going to crack on with this video straight away. So the first book I want to talk about is The Couple Next Door by Shari Lapina. Now this book is very well known and the author is very well established. I did mention it in the haul as a book I'd already finished, so I'm not going to dwell too much on this. This book focuses on a couple, Anne and Marco, who have a 6-month-old baby, and they get invited next door to a dinner party hosted by their neighbours Graham and Cynthia, and their babysitter cancels at the last minute and they decide to just take the baby monitor next door and to check on the baby every 30 minutes but to leave her at home. When they end up returning at the end of the night, the baby has gone missing and the story really starts from there. That isn't really a major spoiler because that's kind of within the end of the first chapter that's revealed. So this book was a really enjoyable romp kind of read while you're reading it. It didn't blow me away. The twists and turns that were given in this book were a little bit predictable for me. So I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. When I was reading it, I really enjoyed it. But this is a book that I would summarise myself as satisfying a craving when I need it, but not particularly mind-blowing. But I know that the author is really well respected in the crime, thriller, mystery genre kind of field, and I would definitely pick another of her books up if I'm in the mood for a kind of quick book read, kind of not have to think too much about it kind of read. So there's that one. And then the next book I want to talk about is Snap by Belinda Bauer. So this book follows Jack, who kind of becomes our main protagonist in this book. So at the beginning he is in childhood and his mother has parked up on the M5 in England in the 90s. I think it's set in the late 90s. And the car has broken down, so she goes to an emergency payphone, which is about 1.5 miles away from where she's parked the car on the hard shoulder. And she's left behind Jack and her 2 other daughters, Joy and Mary. Joy is 9, Jack is 11 and Mary is 2. And they start playing games in the car and then they start to get a bit worried that their mum hasn't come back. And when they decide to leave the car and head to the emergency payphone, they find that the phone is disengaged. It's almost falling off the cord and their mother is nowhere to be seen. And the story starts from there. So this was a unique take on a thriller for me because it is very literary in terms of we get a good long time to dwell on Jack as he reaches teenagehood and he has responsibility for his sisters. His father is not a really present figure as he's gone into his teenagehood. His mother was murdered, but we don't know by who. And he is therefore grown up in a very distorted nightmare where he's having to support his 2 sisters and he does a lot of break-in theft to support them and a lot of criminal activity. And then there's another kind of interlocking story where the police and the detectives, in particular DCI Marvel, has come over from another part of England to this kind of more countryside-esque part of the UK. I can't remember specifically where it is. And he's been assigned, he usually deals with really high murder cases, really notorious murder and rape cases, and he's here for trying to figure out a burglar, a series of thefts that keep happening, which ends up linking him to Jack. That's a little bit of a spoiler, but not really, because once you get into this book, you kind of know that these 2 stories are going to collide. But I'm not going to ruin any more for you than that. I really liked that Jack was multifaceted. He was both a victim and a perpetrator, and he was both guilty and not guilty of his circumstances, and it really gave me a lot of food for thought on that topic. And it kind of made me very conflicted because I did have an affection for Jack that probably didn't warrant all the time. I shouldn't have kind of have loved him as much as I should have done, because he's not always a great character. But I loved that, and I think that kind of endeared me to him, and also knowing his backstory. So I thoroughly enjoyed this book, so I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. And then the next book I want to talk about was an audiobook that I read, which was TheCuckoos Calling by Robert Galbraith / J.K. Rowling. And I listened to this on Audible, so I had this credit a long time ago, and I just bought it when I was closing my Audible account. I had about 3 credits, so I downloaded this one months and months ago. And I decided I wanted to get into it because it's very much crime. And I know that it's a series of 4 books, and I've noticed at my library that all the other books are there, so I thought if I enjoy this one, then I'll continue with the series, which I definitely did enjoy this one. So I gave it 4.5/5 out of 5 stars. I'm a little bit conflicted about how my overall rating is going to be, but considering it's an audiobook of 15 hours and a bit, which I managed to listen to and finish in a week, or just less than a week, about 5 days, which is incredible, because I was still working around that time. But any time I was listening to hours of the audiobook before bed, I thought it was amazing. I think J.K. Rowling's writing was really very visceral, so that the character of Cormoran Strike, who is the kind of lead detective in this series of books, he kind of jumps off the page at you. So he's not a very quintessentially British expectation of what a detective should be. We all kind of have that Sherlock Holmes image in our head. But Cormoran Strike is a big, beefy man with kind of wispy hair, a foul mouth. He's living in his office as a private detective because he has split up with his girlfriend and she's kicked him out. And then we meet Robin, who's a Yorkshire lass, who is doing some temping work through a temping agency, and she's been assigned to be Cormoran Strike's secretary for a period of time. They strike up a very unlikely friendship and an endearing friendship because it is not romantic. It's very playful because they both enjoy each other's company, but then they're both a bit unsure of each other as it's the first book and they don't really know each other that well. And in the background to this, Cormoran Strike has been employed by a gentleman, which I've forgotten his name, to investigate his sister's death. So his sister is Luna Landry, who's a really famous model at the time, and she fell off a balcony and everyone believed she'd committed suicide, but her brother is convinced that there is something untoward going on. So he wants Cormoran Strike to investigate. So that's the main premise of the book. So we meet a lot of different characters that have a relationship with Luna, including her ex-boyfriend, her mother, her model friends and things like that. But then we get this rich development of who Cormoran Strike is and who Robin is and their relationship. And it was done really well. It was done within that nice, playful Sherlock Holmes style of we're interviewing loads of different suspects and we don't really know what's going on, and then at the end we have that nice piece together, which I think is a staple of most kind of crime series. Is things like Agatha Christie novels and Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes novels have influenced massively how crime writing is, and we kind of enjoy that trope, and I definitely enjoyed the tropey elements in this book, but I think it was a refreshing new take on it. And I also particularly loved how contrasting it was to the Harry Potter world that she writes, because obviously she's a genius with the Harry Potter franchise, but this was so beautifully done. It was really relevant. A lot of the characters were people that you could visualise that really jumped off the page, and I've forgotten the name of the guy who narrated it, Robert something. I'll link it down below, but it's on Audible. His narration was fantastic. He did loads of different voices and it really brought the characters to life. So I thoroughly enjoyed that. And when I go to the library tomorrow to return these books, I'm going to take Silkworm out because I'm really excited to see where this series is going to go. And then the next book I want to talk about is Things We Say in the Dark by Kirsty Logan. This is a short story collection that is inspired and influenced by the home life and kind of things that we find comforting at home and our home environments, and distorting it and making it a little bit unnerving and strange and odd. So the main book splits into 3 different kind of segments. So the first segment is the house, the second is the child, and the third is the past. So the first one plays a lot with the imagery of house and home and your connection to that and how that can be disconcerting. And I remember vivid passages of kind of people making houses out of body and body parts of skin, nails and hair and things like that. So it's a very visceral collection. I particularly enjoyed the segments on the child, the second part, because I think I really connect to that. I have a real interest academically and kind of for pleasure in this concept of motherhood and the relationships between mother and child and how motherhood changes a woman's identity and things like that. So this main picture on the front is reminiscent of a short story in here that deals with different ways that people give birth, and she uses this analogy of different fruits and vegetables that people give birth to. So pomegranate seeds is one of them, which I think is a kind of disconcerting, unnerving analogy of maybe I interpreted it as kind of miscarriage or an underdeveloped baby that didn't make it to full term because of the very visceral nature of what a pomegranate seed was for me. But then there's things like melons and other different fruits, lemons is also referenced. So I think this is a kind of reference, this image, to that story. And one that really stuck with me was a story about babies that are kind of being developed in little sea pods. It's a ship where they're all kind of podded on the water, and when they come to full term, this lady's job is to pull them out of the pod and to collect them and put them in a nursery. And these are kind of bred to kind of be like clones, if I remember rightly, and it's really disconcerting because the story, she has a child of her own and she thinks she has more of a maternal relationship to these subhuman, kind of human-esque clones. They're human, they're biologically human, but they're being engineered by us for our own purposes. And she is really struggling with motherhood, and she, in the end, decides to give her baby back up to the sea and kind of put him as part of this project. So that kind of spoiled that particular story, but there's loads of really interesting stories that stuck with me a lot. It is very dark and disconcerting, but it's also cleverly done that it's not fully horror, it doesn't fully make the hairs on the back of your neck stand up, but it makes you think, and it does slightly unnerve a little bit. And there's some interesting bits where Kirsty kind of, in between stories, I'll see if I can give you an example, with this kind of italicized text, she kind of plays and toys with the idea that that's the author's voice coming through in between the stories. She's talking about her and her wife, and then them trying for a baby and having issues with that. But you kind of start to question quite early on the reliability of the narrator, because these segments get a little bit more far-fetched and a lot harder to just outwardly believe. So this whole book and this collection toys with you from the very beginning, but I loved that. And it's one of the best short story collections that I've personally read. I haven't read a whole plethora of them, don't get me wrong, but it's definitely up there with one of the best short story collections that I've ever read. So I've given this 4/4.5 because I didn't get along with all of them, so I can't give it a 5-star. And I think that's my main issue with a lot of short story collections. I can't love them as a whole in the same way as a novel. But to me, to give it a 4.5 is very, very flattering. And I will definitely be keeping my eye out on the rest of what this author does. I know she's got quite a pile of short story collections, I think, that she's also done. So I'll be sure to check them out. So there's that one. And then the next one is Sunburn by Laura Lippman. This was a really enjoyable book. I expected with the fact that I'd been having quite a lot of enjoyable reads, that maybe the good spell would dry up, but with this book it certainly didn't. And also the fact that it's kind of set more of summertime, and people kind of have made this seem like it's a summer seasonal read, really didn't affect me, because there was a lot of reference to autumn in this, because she kind of stays for the summer and then it blends into this time of year now, October time. So I didn't feel like it has any real standing about what time of year you read this. You will enjoy it. If you like the kind of noir type of crime book, if you like something fast-paced, if you like it kind of character-driven with secrets, you like it kind of short and snappy and to the point, then you will love this book. So, like Gillian Flynn, or Gillian Flynn, however you say it, she's put that Sunburn is a dark, gleaming noir gem, which I completely agree with. So this focuses on two main characters, Polly/Pauline, because she comes to Delaware, and I think it's Bellevue, yes, in the 90s, and she was originally named Pauline Smith. When she comes to this new place, she changes her name to Polly, and she starts working at the bar in Bellevue. It's a very small place, and she's run away from her past. So she's run away from 2 children, 2 marriages, and a criminal past that she does not want anybody to know about. Adam, who is a private investigator, has been hired by somebody who we don't really know much about until the story develops, to find out where Polly's gone and what secret she has, and the story kind of goes from there. I don't want to ruin it too much, because it is just fun and enjoyable to find out all those things on your own. Obviously, I can strongly suggest that a romantic flair between Polly and Adam might occur, but you know, it kind of says on the back a steamy affair, so I'm really not ruining it that much. But this was really fast paced. I loved, again, how complex the characters of Adam and Polly were, and Polly is a great character to kind of love and hate at the same time. This book would be nothing without her. She is the staple of this book and what really keeps you hooked. She's devious, but she's very passionate, and there's something kind of alluring about her. Even from her point of view sometimes, and the way she's presented from other characters and from her internal thoughts when you get segments of that in the book, you really don't know how far you can trust it, and I love that. But you also feel the same way for Adam, because they're both keeping secrets from each other. But yeah, she is one of these burnt into your brain kind of characters, because she's so visceral and she's so complex and there's a lot going on. So it's really, really enjoyable reading. So I highly recommend. And then the last book that I'm going to talk about in this haul is Agatha Christie's Crooked House. I really, really enjoyed this. Before I continue, obviously, I don't know if I just said that or not, but I gave this one 4/4.5. Really enjoyed it. And then this one also gets the same rating, 4/4.5. So this follows the Leonides. Tried to go on the internet and search how to pronounce that. So I think it's Leonides family. So this was published by Agatha Christie in 1949, and this story follows Aristide Leonides, who is a famous man in the area, and he is murdered. And his granddaughter Sophia, she was away in Egypt, and she had a bit of a budding romance with Charles Hayward, a man who she met out there, and they kind of promised that if Charles would come back from the war and all was safe and sound, that they would get engaged. So at the beginning of the novel, he goes to Sophia and says, "So are we still on for the engagement? I'm back from war." And she says, "Well, in the meantime, Aristide, my grandfather, has been killed, and we don't think it's an accident, we think it's murder." So she kind of embroils Charles into this story of how are we going to find out what happened. So there's a lot of potential suspects. It is very much in the Agatha Christie style. So they have the grandchildren, which is Sophia, Josephine and Eustace. Then there are Aristide's sons, which is Roger and Philip, and their partners Clemency and Magda. Then there is the kind of aunt-in-law, or the step-aunt, I don't know how you refer to it. So his first wife, Aristide's first wife, her sister Edith lives with them all in this house. She moved in after her sister died to help with childcare. And then Aristide's current wife, Brenda, also lives in the house, and everybody assumes she's having a relationship with Lawrence Brown, who's the tutor who's employed to educate the grandchildren. So there's a lot. They're all living in one house together, including Sophia, and she kind of invites Charles to come to the house, make observations, because Charles's dad works with the Scottish Yard as a policeman. So she says, maybe just try and sweet talk my family and let's find out what happens. So I really enjoyed this. I can't give it a full 5 because the ending was a little bit predictable in terms of it was constantly referencing all the way through, oh, wouldn't it be convenient if it was Brenda, if it was the second wife, because the second wife has a massive age difference from Aristide. There was about 50 years difference. He was in his 70s or 80s and she was in her 30s. She's a similar age to the tutor, so everybody wanted to believe she was having a romance with Lawrence and she booted off her husband. But because it does plug that so much, it's obvious that that's not where it's going to go. But I won't do any other spoilers. But more than that, I just found this so enjoyable. I just was so compelled by it. The characters were fantastic. It was just so juicy. I didn't mind if maybe the ending was a little bit more obvious. This is harder because this is a set family where it's kind of easy to pick at in some ways. I think when there's all kind of strangers who meet on a boat with less tangent connections to one another, I think that makes it easier to presume. Whereas the issue with this book is nobody had a real motive. And that's why it was kind of quite difficult, but easy in some ways to eliminate others. But Agatha personally writes a letter in the front of this, a kind of introduction letter, where she says that this was one of the most enjoyable ones for her writing. And you can feel that it's really fun. It's something different. I haven't read any Poirot or Miss Marple, but it was something refreshing to have a non-kind of detective-based crime story, because I thought this would be somewhere kind of great to start because it's not embroiled me into a big long series or to have to read all of the set Poirots or Miss Marples, for example. So I just thought it was just really enjoyable. It was like a treat to read. It was so fun. And one thing that I was really intrigued about is that I know this was written in 1949 and that Freud died almost 10 years earlier, but there's kind of references to modern criminology and modern psychology in here. It talks about children as witnesses, which I thought was really interesting, and how children see things through a different lens than adults do. And it talked about the modern kind of criminology references here. It talked almost about criminal profiling in the sense that it made reference to the fact that it's described as vanity in here, but it kind of references that sense of grandiose, that if you've done any basic criminology or psychology, that the criminals have a compulsion to want to tell their crimes, and lots of little things that I thought, oh wow, considering this was 1949, there's some really modern and very sound observations in here that stand the test of time. So I really enjoyed that. So yeah, I'm definitely gonna start reading some more Agatha Christie. I know somebody commented in one of my last videos with where to start with Poirot or Miss Marple, so I'm really excited to kind of continue on and see how I get on. So they're all the books that I have read. I currently have Dark Pines and The Flower Girls to continue on with, which I will discuss in my next wrap up. But by that point, I know I'm going to the library tomorrow, so I'm sure that in returning those books I will not leave empty handed. I'm hoping to get the Silkworm, but if anything else catches my eye, oops. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll be back very soon with a brand new video. Bye now.